If you've ever felt that silent ache after someone walked away, you know the weight of wondering whether to speak or say nothing at all. But here's a truth most men never realize sometimes. Your silence speaks louder than your words ever could. She doesn't hear you when you talk. She hears you when you stop, when you detach, when you choose peace over reaction. This video reveals what truly happens when you don't pretend to move on, but actually do. Not for attention, not for revenge, but for freedom. If you're walking the path of self-respect, calm, clarity, and emotional discipline, this space is for you. And if this message resonates, support the channel, because together we're building something powerful, a brotherhood where peace replaces pain, and silence isn't weakness, it's strength. Let's begin. The shift she didn't see coming. There's a moment not loud, not obvious, when something in her starts to feel different. It doesn't crash in like a storm. It slides in quietly. Like a shift in temperature, you don't notice until your breath catches. She posts something, a picture, a story, maybe a song she once knew would get a rise out of you. She expects the usual, a like, a comment, a reaction, some little echo that proves you're still circling her world, still watching, still reachable. But this time, nothing. No heart, no words, no double tap, just silence. She refreshes her screen, checks again. Still nothing. At first, she shrugs it off. You're probably busy. Maybe you're taking a break. Maybe you're giving her space. She tells herself a story to feel in control. But time passes, days turn to a week into two, and slowly, the silence no longer feels like a pause. It starts to feel like absence, a vacuum where your energy used to be, a space she never thought you'd actually leave empty. What she hasn't realized yet, this isn't a delay. It's not strategy. You're not playing cool, waiting for her to notice. You're gone. Not with a bang, not with rage, not with bitterness, but with peace. And that's what begins to bother her. You didn't lash out. You didn't beg. You didn't try to make her feel what you felt. You just stopped participating. No grand exit, no announcement, no emotional monologue. Just distance. Not just physical, but emotional. She starts to feel it, the slow drift of your attention away from her and toward something else. You've always been reachable, always ready to explain yourself, to clarify your heart, to fix things. Even when things were falling apart, you showed up. You answered. You tried. But not this time. This time, you're not just quiet. You've disconnected. And real detachment isn't loud. It doesn't try to prove anything. It doesn't chase. It doesn't cry for closure. It simply releases. It doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you started choosing yourself. She notices you're no longer checking in, no longer crafting the perfect message to reel her back in. You've turned inward, stepped into your stillness, and chosen a path that no longer leads back to her. For the first time, she can't feel your reach. She can't feel your presence. And that unspoken change becomes the loudest thing she hears. She won't say it. She might never admit it. But something inside her starts to crack, starts to unravel. Because for a long time, as long as you were still reacting even through silence, she felt she had some hold, some control. But now, even that's gone. You didn't leave her with a scene. You left her with a silence that feels permanent, not absence driven by anger, but detachment born from clarity. She doesn't know what to do with that, because the man who once stayed reachable is no longer trying. You didn't say goodbye. You just moved forward. And now, she's haunted by the one truth she never expected. You didn't move on to hurt her. You moved on because you finally meant it. Detachment is not a game. Detachment isn't a trick. It's not a performance. It's not some emotional chess move designed to bait her curiosity. It's something far deeper, something sacred. There's a rare kind of power in a man who simply chooses not to play the game anymore. Not because he's bitter, not because he gave up, but because he found something far more valuable than her attention, his own peace. This isn't silence as a strategy. This isn't a pause to create tension. This is the quiet that comes from clarity. You're not ignoring her to get a reaction. You're not staying silent to make her wonder. You're not pretending to be healed, so she'll miss you. You're done. Not out of revenge. Not to spark guilt. Not to prove a point. But because you finally remembered who you are without needing her to confirm it. She once believed you'd orbit her forever, no matter how many times she pushed you away, tested your limits, ignored your messages, or played games with your emotions. You'd always be there, waiting, hoping, ready to forgive. You were the guarantee, the one who wouldn't walk, the safety net she could fall into, and maybe you were that man. For a time, maybe you begged to be seen. Maybe you craved her validation. Maybe you broke parts of yourself just to stay close to someone who didn't know how to hold you. But not anymore. Because something shifted, and it didn't start with anger. It started in silence. Somewhere in the stillness, you remembered, peace isn't something she can offer you. And more importantly, it's not something she can take away. Now your silence is not performative. It's not loud stillness. It's not an act. It's real. It's the kind that doesn't flinch when she posts to trigger you, or when someone brings up her name, or when you scroll past a photo that once tore you apart. These things don't own you anymore. Not because you became numb, but because you became grounded. You've turned your energy inward. You've started showing up for yourself in the ways you once begged others to do. And that transformation, it wasn't overnight. It came after sleepless nights where you unraveled alone. It came after moments you sat in silence, while the ache of being invisible echoed through you. It came from learning how to breathe without attaching her name to every exhale. Now you no longer seek closure. You don't wrestle with memories. You don't rehearse words for a return that may never come, because there's nothing left to say, only silence. But the kind that's earned, built on self-respect. She may look at you now and think you're still playing, still trying to win, but she's wrong. You're not trying to win. You're not even in the game. You walked off the board, not because you lost, but because you saw the game for what it was, a distraction from the man you were meant to be. The real win isn't in being wanted. It's in wanting yourself enough not to stay where you're no longer honored. That's what stuns her. Not your silence, but the fact that it's not temporary. You're not waiting. You're not pretending. You're not hurting out loud, hoping she notices. You've accepted that she may never understand what she lost. She expected a show. She expected noise. She expected the usual reaction posts for attention, flirting for effect, a performance for sympathy. But what she got was your absence. And it wasn't loud. It was healing. You didn't need an audience. You needed space. And in that space, you found your freedom, her loss of control. There was a time when she knew exactly how to pull your strings one down. She could read your emotions like a script. She knew what triggered you, where your walls were weakest, which lines she could cross and still be forgiven. You bent because you wanted her close. You softened because you didn't want to lose her. She held the remote to your heart, and she knew it. One late-night text, a half-hearted "I miss you," a vague Instagram story you knew was about you. That was all it took. You'd come alive again, grasping onto hope. Maybe this time she meant it. Maybe this time she was serious. She never had to say much. Just enough to keep you orbiting. Your emotions were tied to her presence like a puppet bound to invisible strings. And in that predictability, she found power. Not power rooted in love, but power rooted in control. But now, that control is gone. The strings cut, the buttons no longer work, and for the first time, she doesn't know how to reach you. At first, she doesn't notice. Then it creeps in, like cold wind under a door in the middle of the night. Slow, subtle, undeniable. She posts something, waits for a reaction, nothing. Sends a soft "hey," hoping for warmth, silence. She tries again, a memory, a message, a moment, still nothing. You used to flood her with attention. Now that energy flows inward into you, and that terrifies her, because for so long, her confidence wasn't built on her own worth. It was built on how much she could bend yours. This isn't confusion from lack of understanding. It's confusion born from a reality she never thought she'd face. You were the man who always came back. No matter how far she pushed you, no matter how cold she turned, you returned. Every time. But now, you haven't, and maybe you won't. That world she once controlled, where your love orbited her presence, it doesn't exist anymore. Now she stands outside of it, uninvited, unneeded. So when she reaches out with a "hey," a soft apology, a question she already knows the answer to, she expects the old you, the man who replied instantly, who clung to every word like it was a rope. But this time she meets something unfamiliar. Not anger, not bitterness, just calm, steady, unshakable indifference. You don't chase. You don't react. You don't crumble at the sound of her name. And that's what shakes her. It's not rejection she's feeling. It's irrelevance. She used to twist your emotions with a glance. Now she feels like a stranger in your story. That loss of influence forces her to question everything, not just the past, but who you've become. This new you, the one who doesn't need her to feel valuable, isn't someone she recognizes. She can't predict you, can't sway you, can't silence you with silence. And in that shift, you did something rare. You reclaimed your power, not by arguing, not by begging, not by proving, but by living quietly, steadily, completely. Why she's watching you now? She doesn't text. She doesn't comment. She doesn't like your photos or send a "just thinking of you" message. But don't be fooled, she's watching, quietly, privately, in the stillness of her nights. When the noise dies down and it's just her and the glow of her screen, that's when she checks in, not obsessively, but often enough, just to see what you're up to see if you've posted something that reveals a glimpse of your life without her, And when she scrolls and finds a picture of you smiling, one she wasn't prepared for, something twists inside her. It's subtle, but real. You don't look broken. You don't look like a man drowning in regret. In fact, there's something lighter about you, freer, and that unsettles her, because the version of you she remembers would have tried to be seen. You would have posted sad quotes. You would have tried to trigger her attention. You would have made sure she knew you were hurting, but not this you. This version of you isn't performing. You're not screaming into the void, hoping she hears. You're simply living, and not for her. For you, that quiet peace you carry now, it glows in a way that can't be faked. She hears about you, too, from mutual friends. They talk casually about how you've been hitting the gym again, or the new business you're building, or the way you've started spending time with new people, moving differently. No one says it directly to her, but she hears it in the way they speak. There's respect in their tone now, a bit of surprise, even because for the first time, you're not defined by the pain she caused. You're defined by what you've chosen to create. That confuses her, not because she necessarily wants you back, but because she didn't expect you to rebuild. Not like this. Not so completely. Not without her. She always believed she left a mark so deep you'd never move forward. She thought she was the center of your story, that no matter what happened, a piece of you would always orbit her. But you've done something she never prepared for. You replaced the need for her with growth, with discipline, with purpose. She didn't think you'd have the strength to do that. And now, watching from the outside, she doesn't know how to process it, because it's not another woman who's taken her place. It's your evolution. She doesn't see desperation in your eyes anymore. She doesn't hear heartbreak in your words. Instead, she sees clarity, centeredness, a man who no longer defines his worth through someone else's attention, and that's rare. Most people scream for validation. They broadcast their healing just to be noticed, but you didn't. You didn't turn your pain into a stage performance. You turned it into fuel. That kind of quiet transformation, the kind that doesn't need an audience. It stands out because people are drawn to mystery, to strength that isn't loud, to men who don't need to prove they've moved on. She watches you now, not because she wants to disrupt your peace, but because she's trying to understand how you created it without her. You've become unreadable, unpredictable, a man she can no longer control or decode. And in a world obsessed with control, that kind of freedom is magnetic. She doesn't reach out, not yet, maybe not ever. But the silence isn't disinterest. It's curiosity. It's regret. It's her mind trying to rewrite the story she thought she understood. She believed she knew who you were, but the man she sees now, that man is a stranger, a stronger, freer, more grounded version of you. And whether she ever says it aloud or not, a part of her can't help but wonder, what if she had stayed long enough to witness this version of you? The storm within her. There's a storm inside her, not one that shows on the surface, but one that brews in the stillness. Just beneath her composed expression to the world, nothing has changed. She still smiles in photos, attends gatherings, posts light-hearted captions, but behind the smile, there's a pressure building, a restlessness she can't explain, a quiet unease that shadows her confidence. She tells herself, everything's fine. But the questions have started. Was I wrong about him? Did I misread his strength? Did I assume he'd always be the one who stayed because it made me feel safe? These aren't questions she wants. They arrive slowly, drip by drip, like a leaky faucet of doubt. They don't flood her all at once. They wear her down over time. And now, memories she once dismissed replay in her mind, not to relive the warmth, but to reassess everything she thought she understood. Your silence echoes louder than any words you ever said, because she can't use it. She can't interpret it. She can't manipulate it. The emotional safety net she once took for granted is gone. The space you left behind isn't just empty, it's unreachable. And that terrifies her in a way she can't put into words. She used to feel in control, so certain of how you'd react, so sure you'd always return, no matter how cold she became. But now, you're different, not dramatic, not distant out of spite, just different. You're not broadcasting your life, you're not performing your healing, you're living it. Calm, quiet, solid. You don't flinch when she posts something to test the waters. You don't respond to subtle bait. You've stopped playing the emotional chess match, and that shift unsettles her more than she expected. Because now she sees the version of you she never prepared for. The man who doesn't beg to be chosen. The man who doesn't measure his value through her attention. The man who stopped needing to be seen in order to feel whole. And that contrast, it cuts deep. She remembers the version of you that tried, that gave, that waited. Now she sees the man who walked away without slamming the door, who didn't announce his departure. He simply stopped walking back. And that silence, that absence, it's no longer a strategy. It's a state, permanent, rooted. You didn't become cold. You became clear. You didn't leave to hurt her. You released her to heal yourself. And that kind of release, it's the one thing she never thought you'd do. Because she was used to being the center of your emotional universe. She was the pull, the gravity, the one whose silence shaped your days. But now you orbit elsewhere toward your peace, your growth, your self-respect. And she watches that shift like an eclipse, because suddenly, she's no longer the sun in your sky, and the darkness she feels, that's the storm. It's not because you were cruel, it's because you were kind enough to let go, quietly, completely. And that kind of detachment, it can't be undone. It can't be reversed by a text, a glance, or a memory. It leaves her standing in the aftermath trying to make sense of a man she once thought she fully understood. But now you're unpredictable. Not because you're trying to be, but because you've evolved. And in that evolution, in that stillness she can't influence, you've done the one thing she never expected. You've become free. Your peace is your power. Your peace didn't arrive wrapped in comfort. It wasn't handed to you through love, applause, or approval. It was carved through silence, through long nights when sleep escaped you, and thoughts wouldn't stop spinning. You earned it, not through revenge, not through proving anything, but through facing what broke you, and choosing not to break again. You built that peace with hands that once shook from trying too hard, holding on too long, and hoping too much. You built it with a heart that once begged for closure it never received, and a mind that kept playing back every moment, every sentence, trying to make sense of a story that never gave you answers. But here's the power of pain when faced head-on. It either shatters you or sharpens you. And you chose to sharpen, day by day, quietly, brick by brick, You laid down the foundation of a life that no longer depended on her attention to feel valid. You stopped assigning your worth to how she saw you. You stopped waiting for her to come back and make things right. You stopped pretending you were okay just to avoid appearing weak. And that's when something changed, not in her, but in you. Because the version of you now doesn't flinch when her name is mentioned, doesn't shrink when memories surface, doesn't chase after things that should have never required chasing in the first place. Your peace isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It speaks in stillness. It radiates in your actions, in the way you show up for yourself now, without permission, without apology. This peace didn't come from pretending you didn't care. It came from caring deeply, hurting honestly, and then healing properly. That's why it's untouchable, because it wasn't borrowed. It was earned. And she feels that. She sees it not in your words, but in your silence. Not in your presence, but in your absence. Where she once expected a reaction, now there's nothing. Where she once pushed buttons, now there are no buttons left to press. She doesn't know how to navigate this version of you, the one who doesn't perform, the one who doesn't need to be seen to feel seen. She used to feed off your emotional availability, used to depend on the fact that you'd always be around, even when she didn't deserve you. But now, you're no longer available in that way, not out of cruelty, but because you've reclaimed your energy. And that's what disorients her. Not your anger, not your distance, but your calm, your non-response, your refusal to make her the center of your world anymore. This isn't a tactic. This isn't manipulation. It's growth. And real growth is quiet. It doesn't post quotes. It doesn't flex healing. It just is. You're not trying to win her back. You're not trying to make her regret. You're just done. But not in a bitter way. In a peaceful way. You didn't walk away to teach her a lesson. You walked away because you finally learned yours. And now your peace is your armor. It guards you from the old patterns you used to fall into. It protects you from the chaos you once called love. It reminds you every day that love should never cost your self-respect. That presence should never feel like performance. That a connection that demands you betray yourself to keep it was never real in the first place. Now, your peace draws attention, not because it asks for it, but because it commands it. People sense when someone has returned to themselves. They feel the shift. They notice the man who no longer needs applause, because he's clapping for himself internally every time he chooses peace over noise, every time he chooses himself over someone who wouldn't. She may never say it, but she knows. She sees it. She feels it. You're no longer the man she left. You're the man she never thought you'd become. And that's why your peace is not just your power, it's your freedom. It's your legacy. And it's why she'll never forget you. If this message reached you, if you're in the process of healing, rising, or reclaiming your peace, drop a fire emoji or type unstoppable in the comments. Let's see who's living louder than their pain. Support this channel if these words gave you strength, clarity, or the push you've been waiting for. Your support helps this truth reach more men around the world, men who need healing, honesty, and hope. Together, we're building more than a channel. We're creating a movement where growth is the standard, not the exception. Let's make peace louder than performance. Let's stay grounded. Let's stay unstoppable.